It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Change makers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. Changes to your body and brain are normal as you age. And while it may feel like it's out of your control, research shows that there are things you can do to maintain brain health and slow or reduce the effects of neurodegenerative diseases. Today's guest, Dr. Partha Nandi, joins us to discuss the gut-brain connection and how that connection shapes emotions, cognitive abilities, and overall mental health. Dr. Nandi is board certified in Gastroenterology and Internal Medicine. He's the host of the Dr. Nandi Show, the chief health editor at WXYZ ABC Detroit, and author of the book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, the 5 pillars of enhancing your gut and optimizing your cognitive health. Welcome, Dr. Nandi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Doctor, the more I learn about the gut-brain connection, the more fascinated I become. When did you get interested in studying the gut-brain connection?
I'm a gastroenterologist, Joan, so I've always kind of been interested in the gut, but I'll tell you what happened. It took a personal tragedy for our family for me to really get involved even more. So my dad is my biggest, first superhero that I've known. My dad was a brilliant man. So if you ever drive down the road at night, and you'll see these reflective tape at the side of the road, those reflectors that was created by my dad. He made a polymer so people, could see the road when it was in the dark. And he would, for example, work with the U.S. Air Force. If there was a runway that was bombed, he would make a polymer and it would be stronger in 30 minutes. So this guy was, to me, a renaissance man. He really did everything well, super healthy as well, never really hospitalized, no medical problems until one day he had this devastating stroke. And not just a simple stroke, John, but rather it was so that he didn't have any ability to do activities of daily living for the next decade, and it robbed him of his time with his grandkids, and really a time that should be joyous. And at the time I was a practicing doc and thought I was a pretty good doc, and I said, we did this whole workup, $1 million workup. Everything was negative. And the neurologist and the cardiologist, everybody said, we don't know why he had the stroke, but he did. And so since that time, I said, look, there's got to be something I'm missing. At the time, 2007, when he had the stroke, I didn't have the research I did now. But now we know that the brain and the gut are intimately connected. And I tease my kids. I said the brain and the gut talk to each other more than two teenagers at a Taylor Swift concert. I mean, they are constantly sending messages to each other. So the brain and the gut have a direct, I call it almost like a fiber optic messaging system through what's called the vagus nerve, which is a direct nerve connection, bidirectional. The brain's telling the gut's telling the brain what's going on. So the gut has to be in good shape for the brain to be able to receive the signals. The second way the brain and the gut are connected is that the gut wall is super important. The gut wall has the most sophisticated immune system and the second most sophisticated neurological system. So the gut wall has to be intact. If you have inflammation, which is just, when the body has irritation and the cells in the body are active to fight things and they're inflamed, in the gut wall where there's inflammation, that inflammation begins in the gut wall. Remember, the gut wall is there's stool on one side and blood on the other. It's one cell layer thick with a little bit of mucus. So if you have tiny little areas of inflammation, that can poke holes in this wall. And when those holes are there and inflammation begins, it starts in the gut. But then it moves throughout the body, including into the brain. And that can disrupt what's called the blood-brain barrier and cause neurologic diseases. Also, the gut has this army, this amazing trillion-member army that we call the microbiome. That's where the bacteria, viruses, fungi that are in the gut, and they make a lot of the stuff that our body needs. So a lot of people may have heard of serotonin, which is your feel-good hormone. And it may surprise you to know that 90% plus of the serotonin is created in the gut. So neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that are affecting your body, are made in the gut, affecting your brain. Inflammation can affect it. You have a direct connection between the brain and the gut. So they're intimately connected. And when I learned that, I said, well, the good thing is that we can actually do something about it. And that's what I talk about in my book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, how you can really uplift your gut to change your brain and the rest of your body and its health.
Doctor, you know that due to the lifestyle of most people, what we eat and lack of physical movement and stress, that many people are managing inflammation or they have it and aren't even aware of it. So do you think that's why there's such an increase in mental health issues such as depression and anxiety?
I think people, when they want to uplift your health, you've got to have a why, right? You've got to really have a why in which you want to be able to do some of this. Because, they may be listening to me and say, this Dr. Nandi guy, I'm not sure what he's talking about. I don't know if I should even do anything based on the book or anything that we're talking about. To me, it really has to start with the why. It has to start with, a purpose-driven life. When you have a purpose-driven life, you can then say, okay, I need to change things in my life. And I kind of break it down in the book into a 5-pillar methodology to really uplift your health, uplift your gut health and your brain health. The first of those pillars is the why. And not less than a dozen studies have shown that you can change your life, decrease diseases of your brain, your gut, but also decrease diseases of your cardiovascular system, decrease autoimmune diseases and cancer if you just have a purpose-driven life. And why is that? Because when remember, when we were hunters and gatherers, right, we had this mechanism in which we wanted to make sure that we survived. We wanted to have lunch and not be lunch. And so we had this whole fight or flight where we were either hunting or we're trying to protect ourselves and having that reflex. Well, that served us well then. But now there's so many areas in our life that are stressful. So for example, your work life, your personal life, just everything around us. People are worried about election cycles. There's so many things that are causing you to have this fight or flight mechanism. On a microscopic level, that increases inflammation, increases something called cortisol. So when you have a purpose-driven life, when you're focused and, hey, you know what the why is and you understand to a great degree, nothing's perfection, right? But to a great degree, what your purpose is and what you want to do, that takes away some of those microscopic episodes of fight or flight response. And so what I suggest is first, know the why. The second pillar, and we alluded to that, is food. I don't like diets at all. To me, diets are a synonym for failure. When you try a diet, typically you fall off of it because it involves deprivation, involves don't do this, don't do that. I talk about just basically do something unconventional. Get in your kitchen and actually cook something with whole plant-based foods. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be, to me, I talk about the 80-20 or 90-10 rule. So 80 to 90% of the time, do what I talk about, which is eat foods that are mostly plant-based, find an array of fruits and vegetables that you like, but make them yourself so you know what's going on. And you avoid processed foods, including processed carbohydrates and fat. If you do that 80 to 90% of the time, you're still better off than 95% of Americans at this point. The other thing is that have more fermented foods. Have it with each meal. Fermented foods are like yogurt, like kimchi, foods that even like pickles. Every society has these fermented foods that have good probiotics or good bugs for your intestinal system. The second pillar is really talking about your food and your nutrition, not your diet. The third one is movement, and you alluded to that. We're not moving very much. But again, if you do simple things that help you incorporate that into your life, and I have nothing against gyms, but folks who go to the gym like twice a week, and then the rest of the time they're sitting on their couch and zoning out and watching TV or sitting on their phone. That's not movement with purpose. Incorporate it into your life is what I advocate. Play with your kids. Run up and down the stairs. Work in your garden. Do things that incorporate it into your life. That's much more meaningful than anything else that you do that involves, hey, this is my life, and then I'm going to go work out or do something separate from it. Incorporate it into your life so it's purposeful movement. And how is that helpful for your gut? And we talked about anxiety, we talked about depression, and I'm talking also about cognitive decline. Remember, the gut is a muscular organ. Movement incorporating movement in your body helps the GI motility, helps your intestinal system work the way it's supposed to. It also creates the right energy homeostasis for your trillion-member army in your gut called the microbiome. It helps the gut wall integrity. So movement is my third pillar. The fourth one is what you're creating with what you do every single day, which is a community. When you create a community, you also abate, decrease the fight or flight mechanism. A very interesting study that was done in the 1950s called the Rosetto effect. Italian immigrants in the 1950s that really, when they were studied, had virtually had no heart attacks. In the 1950s, when people were dying left and right of heart attacks, they had any heart attacks in people living to their 80s and 90s. And when looked at, this community had only one factor that changed their entire life, which was and their longevity and their disease states, which was community. And these folks ate together, played together, talked with each other, and that protective effect that they had, that community really helped them to ward off disease. And I actually support that, and I offer that if we can establish communities that'll help your gut health as well as your brain health and your overall health. That's my fourth pillar. The fifth one is spirituality. It doesn't always mean prayer. People think, well, I'm not a big prayer, or I'm not somebody who's a yoga fanatic. You don't have to do any of those. If you just can do something as simple as a breathing exercise, and then you stop doing everything else and just concentrate on breathing, or just do a little meditation or Tai Chi or whatever it is that gives you an idea of what your purpose and your place is in the world, that abates some of this unopposed stress. If you follow that 5-pillar method, you can really uplift your life and your gut. And to me, it really takes guts to do that, metaphorically and literally. If you could uplift your gut, but have the courage and the resolution to say, I'm going to make these changes so when I'm at the age where I can enjoy my grandkids, I can really enjoy them and not be stuck in a nursing home, hooked up to tubes and barely recognizing what's going on. And that's to me the key. And I talk about it in detail in the book about these 5 pillars and how they can affect your life. I mean, listen, our statistics are incredible. So every 3 seconds, someone's diagnosed with dementia. Every 6 seconds, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Every 4 minutes, someone's dying of a stroke. It is a crisis. And if we don't act now, then it will not change. And folks always tell me, well, I'm good now. I don't need any of that because I'm feeling fine. I would offer to you that the Alzheimer's that begins, that's actually presenting at age 70, begins at age 50, right? The Parkinson's that's affecting you at age 60 probably started at age 40 in your gut. We see some of the changes in the gut wall, for example, in people with Parkinson's disease that are the same in the brain. You got these Lewy bodies that you see in the brain, and they're called Lewy bodies, and you can see them in the gut wall. So some of these changes are profound. We have an amazing opportunity to impact our life before they take over and ravage our bodies.
So you just mentioned that some of these changes take place when we're younger. Is it ever too late to make these types of lifestyle changes so that perhaps it can reverse what's going on?
100%. It's never too late, right? So we know studies, for example, in strokes. In strokes, we know that patients who do well after a stroke often have a certain type of microbiome. We know that people with Alzheimer's that they're not doing well have a certain signature of their gut health. And so we know that if you can impact that, you can actually impact your outcome. Even in animal studies and mice studies, we can see, for example, 2 groups of mice. One is a group of young mice that were given the guts of an older mouse, and if a stroke occurs in that young mouse, they often die and have horrible outcomes. Conversely, an older mouse who has a stroke but has the gut of a young mouse often thrive. So the idea is that, boy, if we can change the gut of even a person that's not for prevention, but actually who has the disease, we can change some of the outcomes. We can decrease some of these, the effects of this disease. To me, that's as exciting as prevention. Obviously, to me, the best thing is if you can recognize when you're in your 40s or 30s or 50s, whenever it is that you're not symptomatic, you recognize, hey, I've got to do something about my health. and change it, that to me is utopia. That's perfection. But even if you're afflicted with it, I offer to you, if you can change some of the things that you do, diet is the most intuitive, right? People understand that. But I would say even the other things that we're talking about, developing purpose-driven living, developing ways to be able to increase spirituality, movement, and community. Even when you're afflicted with these diseases, you can achieve some of those goals and uplift your life. So it's never too late. Absolutely. And I talk about in the book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, evidence that shows that. And now, when you go see your neurologist, I'm hoping that some of them will say, hey, what's your gut like? What are you eating? What are you doing? And conversely, when you see your gastroenterologist or your gut doctor or your practitioner that you're worried about your gut health, they can say, tell me about your cognition. Tell me what's going on with your brain and what are you doing about your brain health? Because they're so intimately connected. We just haven't made the connections, with our practitioners. We haven't made the connection with our population that, hey, one could affect the other. We kind of think about it intuitively. We have all these sayings, right? I got butterflies in my stomach. I got a gut feeling about this. We have all these little sayings that suggest that we kind of have an idea, but I think once you translate that into activity, not only is it not too late, it's essential, even if you have the disease, and also when you're trying to prevent it.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was actually going to be my next question. Because when people go to their doctor with some of these issues, that the normal course of treatment is usually some type of a pharmaceutical. And sometimes when you even bring these types of things up, a doctor might look at you like you have three heads. So I think it's important from what you're teaching that we empower ourselves because we need to take control of our health. And if your doctor isn't listening to you, perhaps find another one who will.
100%. And, I think more and more my colleagues are starting to incorporate it. Let me give you an example. We used to talk about leaky gut, which is kind of a holistic term that's been used for decades for practitioners who are not traditional Western practitioners. But when patients came in and said, "Oh, I think I have leaky gut," it was met with a giant eye roll in most gastroenterologists. But now, we've progressed. We now have a more acceptable term called intestinal permeability, and we see it in an electron microscope that the basement membrane in the cell wall of the gut is actually broken. So my point is, I think we're getting there. But if you're a patient and you're not getting the answers you need, this is where you say we talk about be your own health hero, be your own health advocate, seek out that help. If this is the 1950s and 60s, you probably can't do that as well as you can do now. Now, we have computers, we have electronics. You can find folks that can actually do this who are thinking the way you are. And if you're not getting the help you need, you got to find other places that give that. But also look at books like mine and others and say, okay, let me educate myself, let me empower myself. It's not to take the place of a physician or a practitioner. It just lets you get a guide, right? An idea of, hey, how should I approach this? That all is not lost. And that's often, we're taught that you just put your hands up and say, it is what it is. My genes determine my life. And now we know that you can actually change your future and your destiny can be in your own hands if you just have a little bit of information and go to the right person that can guide you with expertise. So absolutely. But again, remember, if it's not simple and if it's not something that you can incorporate in your life, chances are it's going to fail because there's so many potions and lotions and ideas and complicated things that are given to you, right, that may not work. It's usually simple things that you have to incorporate in your life that's going to do it. Because I don't know about you, but me, if it's not something that I can make happen within my daily life with my family, it's going to be difficult to incorporate and make changes. And so when you read this book, what I try to say is that I want you to make simple changes every day in your life that can lead to enormous results, right? That's the idea. And you can do that. Every one of us can do it. And it's not this motivational speech. It's reality. It's based on fundamental research looking at each one of these pillars, and really you can become a health superhero to me. My kids, if you ever ask them, who's your dad's superhero? It's not going to be Superman. It's not going to be Spider-Man. It's always Batman, because Batman's an ordinary guy to me with a bunch of tools. and these fancy cars, right? And I think people who are health advocates for themselves can arm themselves with these tools and these pillars and become health superheroes. And again, with a little guidance, you can go a far distance and really do what so many places in the world have done and incorporated. We call them the blue zones, people living to their hundreds, not in wheelchairs, not in nursing homes, but thriving in their communities, giving the wisdom that they have and all the gifts that they have to the younger generations. I mean, that is fabulous. That, to me, is what we're here for. And if we can incorporate these changes, you can achieve those goals.
Doctor, we talked about these lifestyle changes for preventing neurodegenerative diseases and maybe even mitigating some of the damage. But once someone is diagnosed with a full-blown case of dementia or Parkinson's, does the research indicate that by addressing the gut, that may be a cure or a reversal for that one day?
That's a great question. So I think that a cure, probably, we don't have evidence to show a cure, but we do have evidence to show we can decrease the effects and decrease the severity and also change the course of the disease over time. So maybe, let's say a case of Parkinson's, which would progress rapidly over, let's say, 5 years, you can prolong that. You can decrease the severity of it. And I'm hopeful in the future that once we get really deep into the science of how the gut is actually affecting this, we can make the changes to possibly reverse it. Because remember, I told you about these mice studies that show, if you take a young mouse and an older mouse, imagine if you can do a transplant of a gut into someone with a disease. Could you then potentially create reparative factors that can possibly reverse some of these changes? I would hope so, but at this time, I would tell you that you can change some of the course of the disease. You may not be able to completely reverse it, but you can change the severity of it and be able to live better with it. But again, the Holy Grail is all the folks that are listening that don't have it, right? We can affect their lives in the next decade or even the next 20 years from now, that they can have successful lives neurologically and otherwise. That's the exciting thing. We clearly know if we change your gut now, you can prevent it. And you can, if you have the disease, you can decrease some of the severity and the course. But I'm encouraged over time. This is just the beginning, right? We're at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to looking at the gut health and what the gut microbiome can do and what the gut wall can do and the neurotransmitters and the therapeutics. Remember, I talked about what the microbiome is. There's also these concepts of prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotics. Prebiotics are the foods that the probiotics, which are the bugs that you give to your intestinal system, have. And then there are postbiotics, the products that these bugs that are in your intestinal system make. If we can figure out the postbiotics, the actual products that these gut bugs are making, and I talk about it in this book, we can then change the equation for the future, right? If you can create some of these products. So, for example, short-chain fatty acids are created by the microbiome, this trillion-member army in your intestinal system. Those short-chain fatty acids can then make your gut wall whole, decrease inflammation, prevent diseases. We're hoping in the future it can actually change the course of diseases to what you're suggesting. So it's exciting. And to me, the fact that it's the gut that's doing this is great because you can make fundamental changes in your life and change the equation. If it was somewhere else, it would be much more difficult, and it may involve procedures or pharmacological products. Again, I'm not against pharmaceuticals, but I think that if we can do it by using holistic methodology, it's always better, right? Because there are very few side effects of eating lentils that I know about. Maybe you get a little gas in the beginning, that's about it. So it's much more palatable than the list of side effects you have to read when you take any of the pharmaceuticals that are out there.
The book is Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, The 5 Pillars of Enhancing Your Gut and Optimizing Your Cognitive Health. Doctor, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where can they go?
They can go to our website. Thank you for asking that. It's askdrnandi.com, so ASKDRNANDI.com. Also on the Facebook and all the social, Instagram, etc. We're up with the same handle. For the book, it's available everywhere books are sold. Thankfully, we were lucky to be a New York Times bestselling book. So Books are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any bookstore that you have, or you can go to our website. We can show you how to get the book. So I'm hopeful. We're proud of it. We put a lot of work into it. I'm hopeful that people can get some tips that can uplift their lives in some way.
Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation. I enjoyed it. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided is the opinion of our guests and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read our digital articles, and be sure to subscribe to our mailing list. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.